right, I'm pumped for this episode. For those that are listening back at home, Michael Aimette is the CCO at BBDO New York. And we go back, we've covered some of your campaigns around Super Bowl season. So
Sure.
Super Bowl award-winning creative at a large agency. We're going to break this freaking thing down and talk about the path of creativity. You're CCO today. You weren't always a CCO, how you got there. But Michael, first and foremost, what do you like to do outside of advertising?
Oh my God. I spend a tremendous amount of time with my kids. I have teenagers now, and it's amazing how as they've grown and then their interests change and grow, I spend a ton of time with them. They're super creative types, both of them. So I think like kind of seeing what their version of creativity is, how they what they interpret, how they see the world. It's a little bit different. There's a lot of similarities. So it's just amazing to see them kind of do their thing. And for me, like I'm sure we'll talk about this a lot. I love talking about creativity and all the different facets of that. And I think that's a great topic both for the industry and outside the industry. And I think how they inform each other. This is really fun to talk about and think about
Oh,
as we
hell yeah.
go.
All right. Invasive question. Big, probably shouldn't ask this,
Go for it.
but that's the benefit of doing so many of these and being pretty comfortable.
Yeah.
Uh, um, I don't have children. One day I aim and I aspire to have children. Advertising industry, tough. Work-life balance is tough. Did you ever struggle, like being a father, being present, working in advertising? Like, how did you overcome that too, if that was a challenge?
I think that's a great question. I think everyone struggles with that. I mean, I think it's work-life balance, whether or not you have kids is always an issue. It's a demanding space. It's client services. It's, you're working for clients and you're trying to make the best work possible. And sometimes, it's never smooth. It's always bumpy because there's always a
Yep.
twist and turn. Look, I think it's carving out space and you say, this is my time. This is when I'm going to this afternoon, I'm taking a few hours off. And I said, hey, I'm going to be gone for a couple of hours this afternoon to do some stuff. And just being formal with that, I think helps a lot. I think otherwise, if you try and mingle them too much and the brackish waters of like, I'm working and I'm trying to spend time, it doesn't work because everyone's unhappy with that. So I think if you kind of like, sort of compartmentalize your life a little bit as much as you can, you'll probably be happier. Like I'm on or I'm
Yeah.
off. I think being kind of half on, half off is a really tough sort of half measure.
I'm always in the gray area, Michael. I'm always in the
I,
gray.
this is what I want to be true. This is not really what always is true, but you get it.
Yeah. Yeah, that I struggle with that because, being a founder of a business and like living literally with my co-founder, there's always gray area. But
Yeah,
now we do a better job. Like when we're out at the bars, we're out at the bars. Like
you got
no
it.
work talk
You got to
unless
break
something
it.
really, yeah.
You got to
But
break it.
one more follow up on this.
Sure.
Um, Somebody might be listening to say, well, easier said for you because you're the CCO. Like, of course,
No.
like you could take, like, how did you, like, like maybe when you were not a CCO, like, is it easier today? I guess, like, is there more of a welcoming environment? Like people kind of understand it more so today, or did you have to be a little bit more covert about your work-life balance when you
That's
were not a
great.
CCO?
That's such a great question. I think actually as a CCO, it's harder because I always say this, and anyone who's a CCO knows the higher up you go, the more people you serve. Generally speaking, because you're trying to like
Yes.
build a culture at an agency, so you're actually more on than you would be if you were not a CCO. And I'm sure a lot of people could attest to that. So I think that's a little bit of a fallacy.
Yep.
There's no boss. I say that all the time. I'm like, no one's the boss because again, we're serving clients. If we're doing our
They're the
job,
boss, right?
they're the boss, and sometimes then they have bosses too. So there's like it
Yeah.
kind of is an endless cycle. So even trying to pursue that is like a waste of time. I think just doing the right thing. I think working hard and working smart. I mean, we always talk about that. Is like how do you become efficient? How do you work better? It's funny at FCB and now BBDO. I've I've mostly been telling people to work less. Everyone's incredible, especially this generation. The younger creatives, like CD and lower, are incredibly motivated to the point where have to tell them to slow down a little bit. So you'd be surprised at less of pushing them and finding things that they need. Where they can do better and where they can work harder. I'm like, "Ugh, you got to like. I think you'll be much better if you go and take a break. I think it's more of a function of always being on because because we're always on. Um,
Always.
and I think that's the hardest part is like back in the day, and I'm old enough to have been like sort of pre iPhone. Um, you could kind of shut it off a little bit, and you could like you go on a shoot, you wouldn't really hear from your boss for a couple of days. You may call him or her and check in and see how things are, but for the most part, they couldn't be texting you like, "Hey, where's that idea?" So you weren't really multitasking the same way you are now. Now, when I have people on shoots, sometimes I'm on shoots, sometimes I'm not. I often have them working on multiple things at the same time. So like it sort of like becomes like sort of a scarcity of attention. You know, they sometimes are like they're doing so many different things. It's almost like they're kind of half doing everything. And that goes back to the
Mm,
half measures thing that we were talking about before. So I think nowadays it's harder than ever. It's harder for me. I'm sure it's harder for them. But like I try and really push people to take time. You know, when you go on vacation, please go on vacation. When you are off, please be off. We had an outing yesterday. We went to a Mets game with one of our pods. We have a spot, what we call a pod structure, where we have like a business lead, a creative lead, and a strategy lead, and they kind of have their team. And we all went out and had went to a Mets game yesterday, and it was just so nice and refreshing, and kind of a lot rarer than I wish it was.
totally.
But yeah,
That's
like
nice.
it's just no, you don't have to push people that much anymore because everyone is incredibly self motivated.
But you have to reel them back, which is
Yeah,
like a nice thing it's nice for the leadership to do that. If the leadership doesn't do that, then they'll just keep going and they're gonna wear
100%.
themselves out. So the fact that you're building in a Mets game or just the mentality that you have, we don't have to get into all the tactics of how you do it, but the fact that you're saying this and preaching it and being at the CCO level is so refreshing and so helpful, just the mentality that you have.
It's yeah, it's a model behavior too. So for example, like it wasn't like we all went, like everyone like, do you guys want to go? I'm like, of course we want to go. So like Emma Armstrong, our CEO and in BBDO New York was there. Todd Sussman, our chief strategy officer there. I was there. So it's a model behavior. So they go, oh, if they can do it, then I can do it. So again, I
Right.
feel like it just builds some camaraderie. There's just no shortage of effort. That's the thing. There never has been. So I think when you have, you get the sense of like, this is the time to not kill yourself all the time. It's like,
Mhm.
I mean, you talk to a lot of people, they all, there's no, there's the amount of work and effort that it takes to really, really, truly succeed in this business is daunting sometimes.
Totally, totally.
Yeah.
And I wanna talk about being successful in advertising. You know, we're talking before we started recording, um, about the path and the
Mm.
fact, how you got to be a CCO. You took some turns and
Yeah.
you tried different things along your career.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm very type A. I had a very mapped out career plan to the year. And it was really helpful for me knowing that I wanted to be an assistant account executive at a large agency out of college. It gave me my North Star in a way, but
Mhm.
it took me way off the path. And I'm very grateful for that. And like I'm doing breaking entering full time and I love that. But my mentality was to be very detail oriented
Yeah.
and to accept the changes later on. But how did you approach this with your advertising career? When did you know that you wanted to be in advertising if you ever had that
I
actualization?
I love that question because my answer is definitely more circuitous than others. First of all, kudos to you for like having a Type A personality and be able to pivot like that. It takes some guts, right? And I think it's not easy because it's like, oh, this is the way I'm supposed to do things, and this is over here. Should I? That's hard to do. It's hard for
Yeah.
anyone for that matter because
I
you
had a
feel like
really
you
good
miss.
friend who doesn't care about anything.
Right.
Like my best friend, he doesn't give a shit. And
There you go. Right.
he's not from advertising too. So he's just totally fearless. Like
That's yeah.
he doesn't care about ruffling feathers of CCOs. And I'm terrified of that. But
Yeah, of
thank you.
course.
It's a team sport always.
Of course, yeah, and it does help to have someone like that. For me, like, it was interesting because I think people who know me know that my career is a kind of like it was never like this very clear, like, I this is what I want, and I'm, like, laser focused on that. There are quite a few people who are like that, and that does work for them, and I'm like it's not a criticism on them. And the industry tends to reward that kind of mindset of, like, I wanna be a CCO or I wanna do that, and doing that is, again, laudable, but it's just not me. I'm not that guy. I kind of, I was trying to think of a word, and when we were talking earlier, and I was like, ambivalence is the wrong word because that sounds like non-committal in a bad way. But there's a word equivocal. which I thought is a really interesting word. We always use the opposite of equivocal, which is unequivocal. It's like uncanny. No one says
Mm.
canny, but equivocal is a really interesting word because I looked it up a couple of days ago because we were talking about this, and the idea is that equivocal is open more than one interpretation, or being like purposely um, open minded and lateral thinking, and I think that's something that really served me well. I think naturally I didn't really plan this, but I just found the word and I was like, "Oh, that kinda does feel a good description of kinda like my career." Because I
Ooh,
started off as a media planner. My first job in advertising was a media planner. I only took it because I didn't knew nothing about advertising, nothing at all. And I was dating a girl, and she was a media planner. And she's like, "Why don't you try media?" I'm like, "Okay, cool." I had to wear a tie. It was back before
hell yeah.
media was cool. Media is very cool now, but it was not cool then. So yeah,
I don't know if would say that. Personally, that's my opinion here. I respect it, the strategy. I started in media too, Michael, on
there
my
you
first
go. There you go.
internship, and it was not for me.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
wasn't for
at
me.
the grunt level of any job is gonna be difficult and
Of
not what
course.
like but, but maybe looking up the ladder of media would get much more interesting strategy. Nowadays, media, you need tasted media with all the frickin' fragmentation. My side is over.
Exactly.
Back to you, Michael.
Yeah, no, no, I completely agree with you. But I was like a media planner. I was making $16,000 a year, and I was like, this is not my. And I was living in New York. I think was eating like pretzels for dinner and then going to like Knicks games and being like like third row at MSG because like you would get the media deals, but yeah, but you wouldn't. But I also was like living like on basically on the dole. So it was a tough it was a tough time, but an interesting time. But yeah, I realized I wanted to be a creative. I'm like, I didn't know what capacity, so I went to school of visual arts at night, and then I was like, at the same time, I applied to schools for journalism. So this just kind of shows you the different types of writing. I think they're all related and separate at the same time. So I'm like, if I don't get a job in advertising in creative within a year, I deferred for a year. I was going to go to Berkeley in California for journalism at the time, which, I don't know if journalism is a great career now anyway, but that's another topic. Um,
Mhm.
but then I eventually, someone at BBDO called me. So this is a full circle story. Charlie Meismer, who was kind of the ECD at the time. This is like pre David Lubar's. Charlie came in. And he was, a very fascinating guy. But he's like, he asked me, he's like, and he looked at my book and he's like, "Do you drink wine?" I'm like, He's like, "Open a bottle because you just got hired at BBDO." And I was like, "Whoa!" That was like a very dramatic moment. Of course, I could not afford a bottle of wine. It's at that time, so I think I had a beer. Um,
Of
but
course.
I got that was my first job in creative, and then like I was there for a few years, and I got to work on some really fun stuff. And the thing that's really interesting, it's sort of like I think influenced kind of where I opened my eyes to like the different possibilities. It's like you had people like yeah, like Jerry Graff, was working there. He's a friend of mine, known for years. You had Peter Smith, became a novelist, and he's been doing like a lot of films and things like that. And then you even had like way back then, you had the film director Craig Gillespie. I don't know if you know Craig Gillespie. He did I,
Mhm.
Tonya, and he's like very very successful. He was an art director there. So you started to see like all these people had all these different interests, like within and without advertising, and so it started that had a huge influence on me. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna, I was a copywriter at that point, and I was like, you know what, I started publishing a couple of short stories, and I was like, so I dropped the journalism thing. I was doing short stories, but I really loved advertising. I was really enjoying it. But then I was like, okay, I'm gonna leave advertising and go write a novel. So I moved to Ireland, and I was like, I'm gonna write a novel, and I learned one very important thing, which is I'm not a novelist.
What type of novel were you gonna write? Like, what
It
was
was
it?
like it was a dark kind of twisted, it's kind of a Fight Clubby kind of thing. I have vestiges of it in my garage somewhere. Um, it's
Incredible.
it wasn't great, but it was like, but I did learn that like I'm like, okay, I don't like that kind of insular by myself, me and a laptop kind of writing thing. But I learned I love collaboration. I like working with people. I'd only done a few shoots, and I was like, but then I came back to advertising, and I was like, okay, I love advertising. I don't like the novel thing, but I was like, maybe I'll be a screenwriter. And so I started doing that. I came back and forth to BBDO a few times and to other agencies and kind of did the whole freelance world. And then I wrote and directed a film in 2009, the year my kids were born. So, that was an interesting time. My kids were like, I have twins. They literally were born that week. I had a premiere in New York City, which was my wife was very unhappy with me.
And hey, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's an interesting week for sure. How did the
It was an
screening
interesting
go?
week, man.
This episode is brought to you by The Shipyard, which is a full service marketing and communications agency, ladies and gentlemen. They engineer brand love as a measurable business force, building brands designed to spark, hold, and scale across culture and channels. From brand strategy and identity to creative development, digital innovation, media, performance marketing, and public relations, the Shipyard aligns every discipline to fight apathy and atrophy and create an unshakable presence over time. With coordinated strength across owned, earned, and paid ecosystems, the Shipyard helps brands adapt, endure, and perform under pressure so they are not only seen, but known and returned to. At the Shipyard, brand love is engineered to last, delivering integrated marketing, advertising, and communications built for long-term impact. If you want to learn more, visit theshipyard.com, where they have coordinated strength and unshakable results.
Um, but then, but I realized the film industry is a tough place. I really enjoyed the advertising. I liked making stuff and having, um, I just liked making things, and whether it was a TV spot or something, whatever it was. And I think that it really pulled me back into the world because I just felt like it. I think the film industry was just like it was difficult because it was just it would take a year to get something made or not get made oftentimes. You go into this, like, sort of turnaround, what they call it in the film world, where you have a script and it sits in your agent's office for a year and you don't get paid
Mhm.
anything, or you get paid minimally. I found that really unfulfilling, but all the narrative and storytelling stuff I really loved, but you can get that in advertising now when you start to look at some of the work. Some of my favorite work, I know you often ask, like, who would some of their favorite work is. I think
Mhm.
one of my favorite things is John Lewis work, which I
Oh,
know,
yeah.
the Adam and Eve, old Adam and Eve stuff with Rick Brim was, like, always kind of genius work to me. And I found, then I was like, oh my God, you can do that in this context. And that became, had massive influence on me, like really, really digging my heels in on the advertising space at that point. After about 2009, I started getting, like, dead on serious about the business.
So what I'm taking away from this, one, you set out to answer your creative uh, inquiries
Yeah.
internally. You tried and you experimented, and
Yeah.
that's fantastic. But two, also, I'm also learning from this compared to being a novelist, compared to working in film. Advertising is not as creative as those industries. Like, I'm going to say it. Like, at the very best, yes.
Yeah.
Like a titanium lion, some of the, like, best in shows at some of these award shows, they can compete with some of, like, the movies and films out, but, like, just the level of creativity. But, like, also advertising, while it's maybe not as creative as some of these arts fields, truly novel, like being a novelist or a screenwriter, whatever it is a safe environment.
Yeah.
You're still getting a salary. There's, if you're at a good agency, there's no shortage of work, as we talked about earlier. You can always be working on something. You can get paid for this in a collaborative environment. It is, like, truly, I would say, the safest, most creative. When you think about all the levers, it's that perfect cross section of a career. And would you agree with this? Do you disagree
I agree.
fundamentally?
I think I agree with you. I think it is safer. I think beyond that, though, I think there are things about it that are also just patently better than those industries. I think I think the camaraderie you have with people, I think the day to day is, like, there's something magical about that when it's done right. I think, we had that at FCB. We have that at BBDO now.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that culture and people and just a lot of stupid jokes are like, like,
Yeah.
there's a ton of value in the stupid joke. And
Yeah.
so I do think that it does give you, while yes, you're right about the safe thing. I think there is something really wonderful about the just being together and working in that capacity. I have not seen that in other creative industries quite the same
Mhm.
way. I think I've also been really lucky in the sense that I've gotten to work on great stuff. I got at BBDO back in the day. I worked on, Snickers and FedEx, and then I got to work. later on GE, which I'd be happy to talk about anytime because it was a really wonderful, like, kind of 7-year period or so when the work we were doing there was just super fun. And so, like, yes, you're right, it's safer, but it's also you're making a lot of stuff, you're with a lot of people, you're moving business forward, you feel like you're a part of something, and you feel like there's progress. So I think there's other things that bring satisfaction other than safety, that do kind of in a way rivals to those industries, and has its own unique take on it, I guess. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I would agree with that. That sounds good to me, and it's a great endorsement to the industry.
Mm,
Um, so then looking at like the agencies, so the BBDOs, the
mhm,
FCBs, how did you one did you ever think about going independent side? Did you
mm.
ever think about going to the brand side? Were you always geared towards bigger holding company, bigger shops with, or the organizational structure?
It's a great question, and it's something that's on the top of mind for everyone. It's funny, I ended up at big places, but I think that's just kind of happenstance. I don't think it's something that I always go to the people. It's always
Yes.
the people. If you want to talk, Greg Hahn was my boss at BBDO. David Lubars was my
Amazing.
boss at BBDO. So Greg Hahn is Ed Mischief, right? That's his baby now. But he's the same Greg Hahn then that he is now. So I never really looked at it as like, oh, I work at a big place. I'm like, oh, I work for that person or with that person, or
Mhm.
those people work with me. And so I never really put a lot of mental energy into like, oh, how big is this place? Is it small? Is it indie? Is there a holding company on top of it? I do think that there is to because I think the question is fair. I think the holding company conversation has really grown in the last maybe couple
Mhm.
years.
It's an
Clearly we
easy
were just yeah, I
It's an
mean,
easy topic from the media side. From my
yeah,
perspective,
100%. Yeah.
it's an easy one to just go back to, merger, holding companies versus
Yeah.
indies. It's one of those universal things that are always newsworthy that people are going to talk
Yeah.
about in advertising forever.
Yeah, yeah, you just can't escape it. I I'm a little bit more kind of again. I try to stay above the fray of that kind of stuff. I just worry about the work, worry about building the BBDO culture that I knew back when I was there,
Mhm.
and bringing some of the FCB culture in and mingling those two worlds in a really interesting way because there's a lot to learn from everything.
Yep.
BBDO has a new line and a new sort of thought processes with Nancy and CBH. Um, so I think, yeah, I think it's not really that I can't do much about it. So all I do is worry about the things I can affect and worry about and think about. And to me, that's building the culture, getting the right talent, making sure the accounts are like we're doing the best work we can on those accounts. FCB had we had built that agency in a very particular way, and now it's
Mhm.
like double the size essentially. Now that
Which,
we
of course, has its own challenges, of
Oh,
course,
yeah,
and
for
you get
sure. For sure, and
that's
part of it is yeah, and it's just getting everyone on the same page and go like, "Oh, we feel like" the way I described it, when we came from FCB to BBDO, I'm like, I told everyone, I go, "You all have new jobs." Like, it's not FCB people clearly have a new job because it's different letters, but the BBDO people have new jobs too, and so I think that felt like a refresh, and I think we moved to a new office, so everyone kind of instead of like working at one legacy agency or the other, we all kind of moved together into one big space, and now we're all together. So I think that has sort of melded the agencies really nicely. I think we're fully operationally have been for a while now.
Mhm.
So I think it's big, yeah. I mean, it's do big things is a line, and I think, and so I think being afraid of big, and I think big is only scary if it's misinterpreted, and I think if you read big the wrong way, yeah, I guess you could say it's monolithic and unchanging and slow. It's none of those things. What big is just like outsized in my mind, like outsized impact, outsized like a outsized creative idea, like outsized award win, whatever that might be. I think that's what big is to me. So that's how
Yeah.
I don't think too much about big.
We were, just talking, Ross and I, this morning
Mhm.
about Fearless Girl.
Yeah,
Like, talk
sure.
about something outsized and, like, just, like, was built for a bank, and now it stands for something way
Thank
bigger.
you.
Just the one example of millions probably or,
Probably one of the
thousands
best. Yeah.
Totally. That's
Yeah.
the one that comes top of mind. Like, what's an example, like for you that you've either worked on or BBDO or FCB that you've been a part of in your career?
Oh God, there's so many. I mean, the one that we did not too long ago, which I found really interesting because it opened my eyes and opened sort of the aperture about what can be a great idea. And I think this has been happening for a while, but I think for us, we did this thing for Spotify called Spread Beats,
Oh,
um,
the
and
best.
thank you, and I worked with Peter and Roxanne, who were the creatives on it, and to me, like that idea. What I love about that idea, I mean, there's a lot of things, but it's like it reminded you to kind of blow past the deliverables. Blow. Don't think about like what clients are asking for necessarily. What they're asking for is something that changes people's mindsets in a creative way, but they don't know how to do it. They don't know what the media is. So what I loved about that idea was it just kind of it became a media idea, and it started there. And it was like, okay, what is the most impactful thing we could do? It's like, oh, media planners, former media planner as you,
Mhm.
um, they have to go through spreadsheets all the time. That's their thing. That's like it's kind of the slog they have to do during like the new fronts. And so we're like, okay, like, how do we show up for them in a really meaningful way? It's like, oh, we have to send them an email, so let's use that email as our medium, as our canvas. So it's one of those things I always remind people just to not think about ticking the box of like, oh, they want a TV spot or they want an activation or they want a blank, blank, blank. And I think it just was a nice refresher and a reminder. We've done a lot of that kind of work for Michelob Ultra as well, where it's like we just blow past to what we made. It's like we don't make a TV spot, we make a TV show. And I think thinking like out of the box like that, just allows us to. It's just that's where all the fun is. And I think when I first came up, I didn't have that luxury. You made TV spots or print ads or out of home or radio. That was it, and that's kind of all you could really do. And now the aperture is so wide that again, I think anytime we do something like that, I just get it kind of it has this halo effect at the agency and like for me and for all the creatives and beyond the agency as at large, um where you feel like you can do anything, and I think that's where I get really excited. So that one is another one. I think the GE stuff that I referenced earlier was like kind of a golden age because we were doing like crazy stuff. We did this thing called Unimpossible Missions, was sort of this like science projects, where like we took these famous phrases and debunked them using
Mm.
GE science, which is like snowball's chance in hell. We would debunk that. So there's like this amazing little campaign that we hadn't made many of them. And the only kind of GE could do that. At the same time, we did a podcast, sort of like a Orson Welles War of the Worlds, which is like the number one podcast in the world, not like branded podcast, but podcast flat out. And it was
Mhm.
really, really fun thing to do. No one was really doing podcasts then. And then at the same exact time as that, we won a Grand Prix at one show for this GE light bulb like infomercial. So we did like podcast and infomercial, like we just were doing all this weird stuff, and we just broke through mediums and broke through like expectations, and it was just. And they were such a great client. You need a great client always.
Always.
So we were able to make all this great work. It was all award winning, but it was also just like moving the business forward. And
Mhm.
it just felt like good would beget good. It just kept going, and it was just a really, really wonderful time. And if you look at some of the people that worked on that, they were just some really, really talented people. So many of whom I still work with today.
Absolutely. As I'm listening to you and what I'm learning about you, Michael, maybe success tactics, takeaway that I'm trying to employ in my life as well. You said equivocal. I would almost say it seems like you're detached in the best way possible.
Yeah,
Detached to the outcome
yeah,
of your career, of yeah, like just detached. I guess like you're not so married and fixated on what the end result's going to be,
yeah.
which I think is really a great mindset. You're going to work hard and you're doing these amazing things, and what happens happens, and like you're grateful for those opportunities. Do you agree with that?
I love that. It's really interesting because detached could be a negative word, but so the way you're putting it, it's a positive word. Again, I think this is like we're playing with semantics here, but to me, I think whether that's success or failure, I think you have to have a bit of a goldfish memory, because
Hmm.
no matter what, because I think you can get really caught up in ego if you start to believe everything you say. I think oftentimes everyone always asks like, "Oh, what's your biggest failure? What'd you learn from it?" That kind of, which is it's a good question. I've had a million of them, but I don't think like I don't dwell on them too much. And that's not
Mhm.
I think that's a version of detachment that's sort of like everything's kind of ephemeral. Like, your success is going to, eventually it's going to be in the rear view mirror. Look forward and don't worry too much. I think it's
Yeah.
it's a good
Yeah.
it's a
So
simple way to think because otherwise I think, it's like an athlete, when you give up like a 3-run home run in the ninth inning, it's like you're
yeah.
not going to pitch anymore. Like, no, you got to forget it. You got to move on. And if you don't move
Mhm.
on, and that is also success because I think if you dwell on it, you'll just stay there. You'll be in neutral, like kind of remember when I did that thing in 2008. Like you don't want to be
Mhm.
that person.
No.
You got to keep going.
And my last question for you, Michael, we've been talking a lot about philosophy and theory. For the listeners that are trying to break into advertising, what's one tangible thing they should do?
I have a very strong opinion on one thing, which is um, we're at this phase, and I bet you've heard this before. We're in this phase where everything that everyone makes looks amazing. And I think
Yes.
every book that people, when young portfolios, I had a portfolio that was like, you couldn't sneak out of the office with it because it was like a big giant physical portfolio. So if you
Oh,
were
yeah.
interviewing, you were like, everyone knew it. But nowadays, I think I'm not saying this, I'm not anti-craft by any means, but I think it's something worth discussing. I see this every day in the office, and I see it in when I'm looking at young, great creatives, possibly great creatives. They're just everything's so beautifully crafted. I'm looking for like how you think. Like what is your idea? I was talking to a young creative yesterday and she does a great thing where she kind of crashed the one show in a really fun, interesting way herself. And I was like, wow, if I didn't see it for what I was there, but I didn't see her. But if I had, I would have been like, oh my God, I love the way you think. I love the way you kind of approach the problem and get and find an interesting way to like move people into action. So, um, as much as I love craft and I love seeing beautiful books, I'm not saying that don't, but I do see it all the time where people will bring me ideas for we're working on the Budweiser Super Bowl again. We did that last year, and obviously we're doing that again this year. Excited about that, but like everyone's bringing me like these beautiful AI finished 6, 7, 8 board frames of beautiful, and I'm like I don't like the idea. Like you just spend so
Y-
much time.
right.
You killed yourself with this
Yes.
making this thing beautiful, and I don't like the nexus of the thought. So I
Yep.
think we have to be, I think young people, I think as they're coming in, just more ideas, more often, rather
Hmm.
than perfecting the ideas you have. Messy is okay. I think
Yep.
we're all. I think if you, I bet you, if you talk to most creatives, they'd be like, "I just want to know what's on your mind. What drives you? What's your motivation?" And so I would really recommend people focusing on that and
Yep.
being a little bit less perfect,
I
because
know.
this world
I
allows
know.
us to be.
I know. Andres Ordonez shares this
Mm,
philosophy too,
mm,
and
he's a good friend. Yeah,
when he was judging the Crowbar Awards, he was like, they can just submit like a piece of paper, like
totally.
just have them send a photo of the piece of paper of their sketch.
Yeah,
And that's why portfolio schools do that. They still have you put up pieces of paper.
yeah,
They don't even use, some of them don't even use Google Slides yet.
yeah,
Just
I
to
love it.
think about the volume, put it up, post it up, that tactile like ideas shown, talk it through, and then you can build it later. And then we're
100%.
so quick while we're told all the time, and it might be true that AI can help you beautify something, get your ideas shown, and help sell it better. There could
Yes.
be a misconception there. It could be an issue where it's like, oh, I'm going to just generate this, and then you spend a couple 30 minutes, 40 minutes prompting it a shitty idea,
Yeah.
and then you could have just done a quick little sketch, or you could have just
100,
talked
yeah.
it. Yeah,
And young creatives want to impress their bosses, not just me, but other people. And they want to like look good and they want to say, I understand craft. So again, it's like, it's very important craft, but later, not so
yeah. I
early.
would say to you, Michael, if you were my boss and I'm not a creative, I was a creative, I would show you these ideas. I'm like, hey, before I even get started on making these look good, what do you think?
Right.
Is there any nuggets here, or
Yeah.
whoever it
Save your
is, the
time.
CD?
Yeah.
What's the nugget? Is there something here? Because Jamie Robinson, also said like your job as a junior creative is to come up with a proliferation of ideas, just
100%.
shitty, crazy, wild ass ideas that the CD can pull back and find a way to make it work, or which one has some sort of nugget within there. And that's so liberating and freeing for the junior creative that
Mhm.
you're just coming in there to go wild and go big and do a bunch of crazy ideas.
I love Jamie's great. I've known her for a long time, and she's that is definitely her. And I think like all successful creatives think exactly that way. Because I think I'd rather see 6 ideas in its underwear than 2 ideas fully fleshed. Because it's just simple as that. Because again, the kill rate's so high at our level. You're talking about like when you're talking to the Jamies and the AOs and the Danilos and the me and
Yep.
Gabriel Schmidt, all the people that I've known and worked with a lot. CBH, Scott Bell at BBDO in North
Yep.
America now. Like all these people all want they're idea people. They're not, the craft that comes later. Just it's the order of things. It's as simple as that. But it's
Order.
that's the thing I always recommend. And just the other thing I would say to creatives is moonlight a little. Move around. I think we built a structure at BBDO where people are able to kind of work on lots of different things. When I first came up at BBDO, also many many years ago, you couldn't work on Pepsi, for example. It was like a walled garden. You couldn't get on it.
Mhm.
You could
Yeah.
not get on it. I think Jerry Graff was one of the people that really broke the mold because he brought Snickers to the other side of the fence, and then everyone's like, oh my god, we can do good work too. So that it kind of created a more democratic agency. But I think. Um, we don't think that way, and I think people can kind of move around and work in different pods. I was talking about pods before, like in these little groups, but these groups are very like open, and so people can kind of find ways to work here, there, and everywhere. So I'd really recommend like do what you got to do. Obviously, you have to do the work that's necessary. But if you really want to move forward, just get in someone's face that's you really regard. Dan Kelly is an ECD at BBDO, who's great. That's how he worked, and that's how he really welcomes people. Like, I don't even know you, but you're showing me work. That's awesome. That's so cool.
Yep.
So I think and it also shrinks the agency. So it doesn't
Mhm.
feel big. It doesn't feel like monolithic, and it doesn't feel like you can't like make your way. It's like you do. Everyone has a presence. So I think that's a really important. That's a tip I would give anyone once you're in an agency is to do that.
I love it. Michael, great episode. Thank you so much for coming
Yeah,
on.
fun. I
I wish you
enjoyed it.
all the best. I know you're going to keep on crushing it, and I can't wait to see all the work to come from BBDO,
You
New
too.
York.
Nice seeing you, man. Let's go create a media company, you and I together.
Was
We'd be terrible.
Oh my God. No, no more media companies in my life. I'm tapped out
You're tapped out of media company.
after that.
All right. Thanks,
But
man.
thanks,
I really
Michael.
appreciate it. It was fun.